Like I do, like sometimes I just think, oh my God, I'm still 20 on the inside. And then I think, yeah, but no, I'm really not, in many ways that are wonderful and in some ways that are, the physicality of it. And to sort of integrate all these pieces of the ways that you still feel and are vital and engaged and engaging. And also that looking forward is a different thing now.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I speak with fascinating people from all over the world, from every walk of life, who will inspire you to live with zest. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, and my mission is to bring you optimism about aging and help you make full use of the new opportunities that only come at this stage of life. To find out more about the podcast, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. And while you're there, sign up for my weekly email newsletter, The Insider, where you will get fun and quirky tidbits about the show and my exploits, including when I went python hunting in Florida and my participation in the National Senior Games. And if you love the podcast, I'd be grateful if you shared it with your friends. Our music is courtesy of Judy Banker, who was a previous guest on the show. Find out more at judybanker.com. And our technical director is Stephen Litweiler. Well, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome back today's guest. Known for her expertise on gender roles and social commentary, Peggy Orenstein's new book is quite a departure from her usual fare. In this book, she explores some of the issues of aging, empty nest syndrome, her relationship with her aged father, coming to terms with her identity as an older woman, and she does this all through the lens of knitting. Peggy's book, Unraveling, What I Learned About Life While Shearing Sheep, Dyeing Wool, and Making the World's Ugliest Sweater, is a sheer delight, pun intended, and also touches on all of our anxieties about getting older. Welcome to the show, Peggy.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm really excited to talk to you. I love this book. It was right up my alley in so many ways. I'm going to sort of switch around what I was going to ask you first. I'm just wondering how it was for you to write a book that was very self-revealing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny when you were saying in the introduction that this book was a departure. I've thought a lot about that because I think it is and it isn't. I mean, people will sort of say like, wait, you were writing about teenagers and sex and now you're writing about knitting. That seems like a departure. But my whole career, I've really been interested in the way we live now, and what the kind of meaning of our ordinary lives. And I think that's sort of the career-long theme for me. And I have always, or for a long time, written to a degree from the personal. And this is my second memoir. Actually, years ago, I wrote Waiting for Daisy, which was about my attempt to have, the long journey towards having our daughter and having cancer along the way and all these other things. So I'm kind of comfortable with writing personally. And also, I guess I feel like it's a little bit, I kind of have to, I mean, it's sort of, I just, it's a compulsion would be maybe too strong, but as a writer, it's like, it's what I feel. It feels like a calling a little bit to use my own life to explore these issues.
It's meaningful to you. It makes it meaningful.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yes, that's really interesting. I'm a knitter. We talked about this off mic, and I'm the same age, and I'm just sort of was trying to get in your head a little bit while I was reading the book. And I'm wondering just what was that moment where it came together for you, this really clever title, Unraveling. What were you knitting? Were you cooking? Were you walking? And you thought, wow, I can merge these two concepts.
Gosh, it kind of popped into my head. Originally, when I had pitched the book, actually, I had just called it Knit One. like, because I was thinking I'm going to knit a sweater, knit one, and that's funny. But the more I looked at it, the less inspired I felt by that, and I started thinking, I need a new title, I need a new title, I need a new title, and it originally popped into my head as Unraveled, and then my editor said ings are better than ids, so how about Unraveling? And I thought that's it, that's exactly how I felt. I mean, it just felt like this whole period of time, right? Whether it was about, this new shift in internally, or in my chronological life, or going through the pandemic year, which was when I was doing this, all of it just felt like the whole world, my interior self. And then of course, knitting, it was just like all unraveling.
So many things that will be very resonant with our audience, so many things we have to make room for, I guess, in the aging process. Some of them challenging, some of them joyful, and you cover a lot of them. You talk about sending your daughter off to school, wondering, first of all, where she's going to end up, and then your relationship with your dad, who is aged, your recent death of your mom, and then coming to terms with your own identity as an older woman. I'm really sort of sinking into this identity of like 60 is just never going to look like 30.
No, it's not.
No matter how much makeup or, whatever you get.
Zoom blur.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a piece that came out during the pandemic where somebody was writing about this. She was saying something like that. Although she's 60, she still feels like I think she said 20 or something. And I thought, yeah, and no, like I do, like sometimes I just think, oh my God, I'm still 20 on the inside. And then I think, yeah, but no, I'm really not, in many ways that are wonderful, and in some ways that are, the physicality of it, and to sort of integrate all these pieces of the ways that you still feel and are vital and engaged and engaging, and also that looking forward is a different thing now than it was when I was 30, and thinking about how precious the remaining time is, and what you want to do with it, and who you want to be with, and how you want to be, and what work you want to do, or what work you don't want to do. I think it all comes to the fore. And then all of that, for me, so much of that was happening, this crucible of this moment also happening at a time when everything just stopped during lockdown, making it sort of more intense, and also really creating space to really have that reckoning.
Yeah, when people say aging's just a number, I bristle a bit, because I think it really doesn't touch the deep ambivalence about aging, that some things are so wonderful and freeing and liberating, all this stuff. Many of us have more time to do things we've always wanted to do. And then the reality is, if you garden too much, you wake up and you're really stiff.
Yeah. I'm about to go on or not about to, but in the spring, I am hoping to go on a 170-mile walk, as one does. And I keep looking at my right foot and thinking, I hope I can do that. I think I could do that. And also feeling like, if not now, when? Like, if I want to do this trip in Slovenia, if I want to do this trip, it's now, because who knows, and so there is that also, which is sort of a wonderful thing of seizing the moment and thinking you need to you need to be a little more present tense in certain things, so that if you want to do things or experience things, don't wait. It's time.
I just booked a trip for myself to Amsterdam, because it's a bucket list thing. I've always wanted to go to the Anne Frank house. And, it's the same thing that you've said. If not now, when?
Right.
Why wait? What's the advantage here?
Exactly. Maybe you'll be able to do it in 20 years, but maybe you won't.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
So do it.
Do it.
Have some Indonesian food. It's great in Amsterdam. Best
Is
food
it?
there. Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I'm delighted. I'm actually just booked a trip to kayak in the canals,
Mm,
which sounds
fun.
really fun, up close
Sounds
and
very fun.
personal.
Yeah.
The seizing the moment. Let me tell you what I've heard about that, and I'm really curious to hear your ideas about this. I have clients and also guests who have said, "Yeah, I understand seizing the moment, but it's really scary." You
Yeah.
know, I'm 50, I'm 55, I'm 60. That's all lovely, but my life has been taken care of, making sure, setting up, managing, all, you know, sort of being the big administrator in the family. And seizing the moment means that I have to do something that I really want to do, but I have never done. How can I do that? And
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about the fear and the discomfort of, like, say, taking a 170-mile walk or going somewhere very different?
Well, I mean, I think that it's particularly, for women, that most of us live a lot as caregivers, caretakers, and for others. And that when we hit this moment, and it's part of what I was wrestling with in Unraveling, that your children, it's again, that sort of combination of liberation and, anxiety or uncertainty or feeling like you're falling off a cliff, that the kids are going off and people don't need you in the same way, and you finally have this time for yourself, and it's a little bit scary. I've always, I don't know, I'm a little, my family always looks at me a little askance. I mean, it's sort of, what makes me want to go off and suddenly decide I need to learn how to shear a sheep.
We're going to get to that.
I have a little bit, I don't know what it is. I cannot explain this internal thing that I have, but I am somebody who has always needed on occasion to go off and do something that pushes me. So like whether it's I've gone dog sledding in the Arctic Circle, or suddenly I need to go on a 170-mile, walk. I don't know what that is about my internal, wiring, but I've always had that. My husband is not like that at all. And I do not do these things with him. He's not interested. But if I don't do something like that periodically, I get very restless and unhappy. I don't
see.
know why.
So that's just sort of inherent to you. You like to challenge yourself and put yourself in really, they're uncomfortable, both figuratively and literally. I mean, you were all bruised up. Could you talk about, because it's such the images that come up when you decide, yes, of course, you're going to shear a sheep, you find a farm. Take us through that scene.
Yeah. I mean, it's something I can't, my editor was like, well, why do you want to do it? I said, I don't know. I've always wanted to do it. Maybe it's because I'm the granddaughter of homesteaders. I don't know. But, or I had a Laura Ingalls Wilder, like obsession as a kid. I'm not sure, but I've always had this desire to go from sheep to sweater. And I can't fully tell you why. It would be nice if I could. But since I have tried for years to get into the one shearing school in Northern California where I live, but it always, either I can't, it's 1 week a year, I could never do it, or it filled up in like a nanosecond. I couldn't do it. So finally, I don't know who all these people are who are learning to shear sheep, because there's not a lot of sheep shearers in the world. So, but I think they're like me. I think they're people like me who just decide they want to see what it's like. So when the pandemic hit, we had lockdown. I thought, oh, well, now I've got nothing but time. And so I thought I would pursue that. And it's, very difficult to find anybody to do anything with you, let alone shear a sheep, right?
Right.
But I found somebody, and I really wanted to learn from a woman. That was a big priority for me, because I had learned years ago to windsurf. And I felt that learning from a woman who understood like upper body strength issues and the need to learn, sort of balance and other things rather than just trying to do it through your muscles was really crucial to learning that. And I thought there would be something similar here. So I found this young woman who could teach me, and we found this ranch that was this wonderful, run by consensus, regenerative farming, cool ranch out in Sonoma, that had some sheep that could use kind of a mid-season trim. And we went out there, and they had all these sheep in the pen for me. And then, and you're out there, and sheep, they're not small.
No,
they're not small. They don't, shearing, it doesn't hurt them, and they need to be shorn because otherwise all kinds of bad things will happen to them. But it's not like they love it. It's like if you have I have a Labradoodle dog, and she needs to be trimmed. She doesn't love it.
No,
she
tolerates it.
She
the
tolerates
best.
it.
Yeah.
So the sheep will they don't, they tolerate it. It doesn't hurt them, but they don't want to be there. And if they think they can get away, they will. And the way they get away is by kicking, and they've got hooves. And, they weigh 150 pounds. And
when you drove up and you saw the sheep that they had put aside for you, did your excitement wane at all, or were you?
Oh, I kind of thought, what have I done here? The whole time I was so blithe about it. They would say, my teacher would send me, a release form to sign in case I got, badly injured. And I was like, yeah, no problem. And they'd say, it's the hardest job in the world. It's one of the world's most difficult things. And I think, yeah, sure, no problem.
Right.
The woman I was learning from was 30 or 29. I thought, sure, no problem. I'm twice her age, no biggie. I just persisted in this kind of dream that, sure, I can do this. And then you get there, and there's these sheep, and you have to back them out of the pen, flip them over, and then the blade is these, it's two rapidly whirring blades without any safety or anything.
It's just open, sharp
blades.
Stuff.
Yes.
Coming right near you.
Yes. And I suddenly realized what I had done. And I think if I hadn't committed to writing about, when I commit to writing about something, it's like a different personality takes over. And so
you research yourself.
Yeah, I have to do it, and I find myself in positions sometimes as a writer where I just think, well, I would never do this as a person. Peggy Orenstein would never do this thing, but Peggy Orenstein, the writer, I have to do it. And so I just barrel ahead. And so, it was really one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. I cannot even begin to emphasize how hard shearing sheep is. I sheared 3 of them, and it was really, 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 really hard. And I would do it again, I think.
That was such a lovely paradox in a way, because you're just, you're nicking yourself. It's kicking your back. You're just like, I'm going to pay for this. Muscles you never knew you had. And then you were like, it is sort of almost euphoric.
It's I was going to say, it's like a high. And I mean, isn't that like so much in life? Like you do something and you think, oh my gosh, this is so hard. I'll never do it. Oh my goodness. I mean, the whole book to me was this exercise. I mean, it's an exercise in creativity and learning like when you're, especially I think for those of us who do something that is thought to be creative for a living, like writing, there's a way that you lose the joy, not lose it entirely. I mean, I love what I do, but that quality of being a beginner and not knowing what you're doing and feeling like any result is amazing. I think that we lose that a lot as we get older and we become very proficient in the things that we're proficient in. And so this opportunity to just honestly just suck at something and just enjoy that, like I did it at all, and what you can learn from that. In every step, whether it was the shearing or the processing or the spinning or the dyeing, knitting, I'm pretty proficient at, but all that, it was just sort of a gift to do this thing that just
it was really hard.
Was hard, but also that just took me out. I couldn't be an expert at it. I was never going to be an expert at it. I was just going to have the joy of learning how to do something for the first time. And that's an amazing thing to do, particularly at this point in life. I think at any point, but really at this point in life.
I think that's such great advice. Hi, everyone. You may have noticed that Zestful Aging Podcast does not run a lot of ads. That's because I'm just not willing to endorse products that I don't have total confidence in and that I don't use myself. So it really means something when I tell you that after I interviewed Dr. Bill Rawls on cellular health, read his books, and learned about his high standards for quality control, I was sold. I placed an order for Vital Plant supplements immediately. I encourage you to check out both of my interviews with Dr. Bill Rawls and hop on over to vitalplan.com. If you enter Zestful15, they will give you a 15% off of your first order. I'm really excited for you to try these products. I think you'll be very impressed. Now, back to the show. Talk a little bit. I mean, this whole dyeing business.
I know.
You really just went in with both feet.
I loved the dyeing. The dyeing was super fun. I mean, the shearing was an amazing experience and sort of, a weird thing to do. But the dyeing, I mean, anybody, could work with natural dye. So I started with my garden and I grew some flowers that work as natural dye. And a friend of mine who has a nursery gave me some plantings and my fig tree. I was living, I mean, during all of this also. So there was the pandemic was going on, the fires in Northern California where I live, and we were living in a fire zone. We've moved since then. And this feeling of, and lockdown and the smoke and everything. And I was getting increasingly anxious about whether we should stay in our home that we'd been in for 25 years. And in the end, we did not. But all of these things. So I'm looking around my yard and thinking about what home means and what place means, and my daughter leaving and, the aging and my husband retiring and, all of these transitions and all of this sense of this idea of place and home and solidity that I've built. Kind of, suddenly changing. And so when I looked around in my yard, if I was going to leave this home and if I, what represented the home and what would I take with me? And so I started with the fig tree in our front yard that I had fallen in love with when we moved in the 90s and made, boiled up the leaves and threw some of the yarn I'd made in. And my daughter, meanwhile, is going, "Mom, that stinks. That's horrible." And my husband's going, "I don't know. It smells. Oh, no, actually it doesn't." And there's this this magic and this alchemy that came from dyeing that I just loved. And this sort of, it was just this magic of suddenly you've got color and it's an incredible feeling. And then I sort of got tired of the sort of hobbit looking colors that you could get from the things in my yard. Middle Earth. I got a lot of Middle Earth.
Yeah.
And so I started sending away then for, but only natural colors. So I used only plants and wood chips and things like that. And I made a beautiful, I mean, if you look at the book, it'll be on the back jacket of the book, all the colors that I made. I made a whole rainbow. And it was spectacular. And part of this was also just learning, why I think probably a lot of your listeners are very conscious about food. And I think that they're probably very conscious about, sustainable, organic, they're very educated around those issues. We are so much less educated around the impact of our clothing. And that is a big central theme in this book, was that why don't we think about our clothes the way that we think about our food? Because the fact that we don't is kind of an ecological disaster.
Yeah.
And so the dyeing chapters were also very central to that, to thinking about, what are, the fact that this happens so out of our sight line in other countries, and that we are so disconnected from the production of our clothing, is creating this, and the way that fast fashion has sped all of that up. I was sort of aware, I think we're kind of a little bit aware, but I wasn't really aware. And it has really and going through the process of making a garment from scratch not only brought home, the complexity of that and the beauty of that, but also has made me think a lot harder about how I buy and wear and care for and dispose of my clothing, and I'm doing a lot less of it than I used to.
You gave an example, I think, was it in India where one of the streams runs
Black
yellow?
Bangladesh.
Or was it black Bangladesh?
Yeah, and in
because
parts
that's
of
the
in China too. Parts of China you can see. I mean, they've put some regulations in place supposedly, but you could tell what colors they were working with by looking at the rivers. They'd be pink, they'd be orange.
Wow, gotta go somewhere.
Yeah, all of that, or the piles and piles of clothing in developing countries that they call dead white men's clothes, which is all the stuff that we're giving away at Goodwill and thinking that it's being, used somewhere. So, and all of this is accelerated by fast fashion and how much more rapidly we cycle our clothing now. How much more clothing we buy, how much less we spend on it, and how much more we get rid of it. Whereas when we were young, I mean, you probably remember, right, when you were a kid, that you'd go school shopping for clothes, right?
That's right. And it wasn't a lot of turnover. It was
right,
like,
and that was it.
Yeah.
You got your clothes in September. That was it.
That was a thrill.
You didn't go 3 weeks later to H&M and get another set of clothes.
Right. Did you ever read the book Secondhand by Eric Minter?
I have not.
Oh, you would love it. It talks all about what you're talking about, all of this, the culture around. He follows. He lives in Arizona. He was in Arizona. I think he lives in Thailand now. But he followed clothes throughout the entire lifespan to Africa, to developing nations, and he actually came up with some things that were actually more complex than I thought they would be. But you might really enjoy. In fact, I interviewed him because I'm also a thrifter. So I was very interested in, what's going on with this? And you probably saw the article in the New York Times that said basically thrifting is dead now because the clothes are such crap.
I don't know if I totally buy that, but it's true that it's again the influence of fast fashion. But I see you see sort of both ends of this with our kids that, on one hand, there's all these TikTok, haul videos where they're pulling in, 30,000 garments that they got for 6 cents from H&M or from, Boohoo or wherever they're getting their stuff now. But then on the other end, there's people like my daughter and her friends who would never ever buy anything there and who are really conscious of what they buy and who are getting, who are really sort of trying to be more particular about buying things that are ethically made or buying things through thrift or that kind of thing. So I think both are happening, but it was really, and even things, and also things like when I went to Sheer, I was wearing my my fleece top. The fleece top we all have, and I had what I say is that I had no idea that was like bringing a ham and cheese sandwich on white bread to a bar mitzvah. That. The fact that we even call that fleece, it's not fleece. It is plastic. And yes, it's made with water bottles or whatever, but you still, at the end, you're going to throw it away. And
they're going to
shed the microfibers everywhere in the meantime.
Oh my God. It's funny because I had a certain smugness about getting my fleece at the thrift store. Look at me. Well, you're
microfibers.
Come down from your high horse because it's not as great as you think it is.
Right. And then, by the time I got done, looking at all of this, there's the point where I just said, and all I want to do though, I just want to buy a pair of pants. And the whole, looking at all of this, I just felt so overwhelmed. I wanted to take to my eco-certified bed, but it's really hard. It's really hard.
It is.
But it's also, something that for those of us who, and I think, all of us shouldn't do, care about how we're stewarding this world and how, what we're going to leave for our children and grandchildren. And this, we have to be looking at what goes on our bodies as well as what goes in it. So this book was also a way there's a lot that I'm exploring here, but that was really important to me to be exploring too.
Are there more thoughts? Are you developing more ideas for the next book out of what you learned writing Unraveling?
No.
Not particularly.
Now, if you got any ideas? I don't know. I'm not really sure where I'm going to go from here, but I mean, I really enjoyed with this book the combination of doing something that was sort of a fun, um, a fun project
Mm-hmm.
that allowed me to explore, aging and the environment and the pandemic and we haven't, my dad who has subsequently died, but one of the things I had not expected, I think I make a joke throughout the book that so many of us learn craft from our mothers,
Yes, yes.
I started abbreviating SLFHM. She learned from her mom in my notes. So
Mm-hmm.
every time I meet somebody in the book, I put in parentheses SLFHM because everybody
Which
is
I
learning,
loved. Yes.
and so I knew my mom died in 2016, and I thought, well, this is going to bring up a lot around that, which it did, but I was not prepared for how much it gave me in my relationship with my dad, um, who had dementia and was declining, increasingly during the course of the pandemic year. It was so hard on him. He was in an independent living facility with full-time aides, and none of his kids could visit him, and that whole thing. And I would sit when I was doing these tasks for the book, like it took forever. It took forever to get that dirty fleece that I shared into being something that I could spin. You have
Mm-hmm.
to, wash it. You have to card it. You have to do all this stuff. And I'm not, again, beginner, took me forever. And I would just sit there while I was doing it with my dad on the computer, on Zoom, and watch, like, the reruns of the baseball games he was watching. And he kind of perceived me as being there with, actually in the room with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it, I mean, I think for those of us who've had a parent who descended into Alzheimer's or dementia, that loss is so devastating. It's so hard. But what I guess I found through that time was that I didn't always have an easy relationship with my dad, which I write about, and um, it gave me the chance to experience and express a level of love for him and to him that I don't know that I would have ever otherwise had or done. And to sort of experience him, we were lucky that the way that he devolved, he turned very sweet and
Mm-hmm.
loving and
Mm-hmm.
childlike. And so it was sort of like being around him as a little boy. And he was a really sweet little boy. And to be able to sort of love my little boy dad like that, while I was sitting and carding or dyeing or knitting or whatever I was doing, um, ended up being a really beautiful and healing and sustaining thing. And now that he is gone, I'm really grateful to have had that time together.
Do you think, and this may be a little woo-woo, although I know you live in Berkeley, so you're you can handle
I
it.
can
But
take it.
do you think that? I mean, that's such a beautiful example. Do you think our knitting is sort of imbued with whatever emotion or we're feeling at the time? Does it? Are we knitting in history? Is that? Did it feel like that when you're?
Yes. Yes, I do feel that. I mean, whether that's true, in terms of, like, I don't know that that means how other people perceive it, but I feel like anything that I knit and the sweater that I ended up making, I don't know why it weighs 3 pounds, but it weighs 3 pounds, which is, just for an example, like the heaviest sweater in my closet, like the one I wear when I go home to visit my family in Minneapolis, is a pound. So it's
Oh
a
boy!
very heavy sweater. It's
Wow.
uncomfortably weighty, not just thick like warm, but like actually physically
I
weighty on my
I
body.
understand.
Um,
Yes.
and I feel like it's almost a metaphor because so much was knit into that sweater. The pandemic, the aging, the fires, the my anxieties, my fears, my love for my family, my love for my. I mean, that sweater is carrying
Hmm.
all these things, and that and I think that the whole damned year was in that sweater, and I think
Mm.
that that's true. We knit for love. We knit. There's so many reasons that we knit, and also knitting, which in the end was only really like a chapter in the whole book, but we take for, I think that there's this way that people in a patronizing way, say that, knitting is a bunch of little old ladies, which first of all, what the heck's wrong with that? And I write a lot about the idea of, like, are we little old ladies, or are we, the crone, and the sort of way that that's both a fearsome and a wise image in our culture. And sort of what it means to be making this passage. I talk about the three fates, and they are represented by the maiden, the matron, and the crone, and what it means to be making this kind of transformation. But also that can allow us a kind of shield, where we just appear to be these benign little figures knitting, but in fact, knitting has been an incredibly political and activist craft, pretty much forever. And one of, if you think about, like, even when Trump was elected, right? What's the first thing? What's the first thing women? I mean, we cried,
right.
But what did we do?
Yes,
I mean, you can
did.
feel however you feel about pussy hats. I know they've been controversial, whatever. That's fine. But what was the first thing we did? We knit, like, and that is not an accident. And I talk a lot about the sort of history of political knitting going back to, the French Revolution, going back to the American Revolution, and all of these things that are very, that where women's work and women's craft, I talk about the mill workers and all these things, are sort of hidden underneath the benign idea that we're just ladies who, mess around with fiber.
Oh, I love that. I think about knitting circles. I think about books that have been written, which I'm sure you've looked at too, where knitting circles have saved people in the depths of their grief. And, the power, even the meditative power, even where your brain waves go, it's a pretty impressive and powerful act.
It really is. And or the yarn bombing, the years of yarn when that was a thing, or all these things. And there's all this evidence about, lowering blood pressure. I mean, when the pandemic, when lockdown was first starting, and oh my gosh, during that time, that crazy time, basically the only thing I could do to keep myself calm was knitting. I would just sit and knit, and I thought, okay, I can't control anything that's happening right now, but I can control this. I can control the throwing I'm a thrower, throwing the yarn and the click of the needles and the accrual of the rows and the
feel, the tactile
texture.
And the meditative movement is hypnotic.
Yeah. And I was, the other thing I was doing, I don't write about this, but I was making a really complicated brioche blanket. I thought, gosh, I'm home. This is what we do. And then I finished it. It was like 13 different colors. It was like this crazy blanket. And I finished it, and I kept trying. This is and landed on the cutting room floor of the book. But the blanket started mirroring the vaccine progress. And so there would be like a major, breakthrough, and I'd be going, oh yeah, I'm getting really far. And then suddenly there'd be, something would happen, and the vaccine would face plant. They turned out, oh, that didn't work. And I'd have to rip way back. And I'd think, what's going on? And then I started getting to the end of the blanket, and it was not quite the election. And I realized I was going to finish the blanket, and it was going to be before the election. And if there was a vaccine, then it would help Trump if I did it before. So I put the blanket down, and they didn't finish the vaccine.
Superstitious.
And I picked it up after the election, and after Biden won, and then I finished it then. And then the vaccine, the next week after I finished the blanket, we had the vaccine.
That's your vaccine blanket.
My vaccine blanket, but I could not keep that blanket. Back to your original point, when we have the what we knit in, what emotion we knit into our blanket, what work we knit in, is there for us. And every time I looked at that blanket, all I could think of was like the scariness of lockdown. And so I gave it to a friend who loves it, and who said that she actually was just today said to me that the other night she woke up in the middle of the night having kind of a panicky feeling, and she reached down and she took the blanket and she wrapped it around herself, and she said she remembered that she had a friend who gave her this blanket, and she fell back asleep. And I felt so good about that.
That's beautiful.
Hmm.
There's so much here. There's a course at Kripalu, which is, in
Hmm.
Massachusetts, big. You're familiar with it,
Yeah.
and it's a woman I interviewed because she does a course called Knit, Pray, Love. And I
Mm.
thought, how beautiful is that? And
Yeah.
so they talk about this kind of knitting in your intention, knitting in, yourself and
Hmm.
yeah. And then, if you gift it or whatever. So,
And
so
another
beautiful.
piece of that was when I was doing the dye work, I was dyeing with indigo, which is a whole separate thing. And I talk about blue a lot as a concept and an idea and a music and all these things, as well as just being as a color. It has so blue is,
Mm,
and my love of Joni Mitchell's album Blue when I was
yes.
young, and all of this, just like the meaning of blue. But one of the things about
Oh,
indigo is that it doesn't adhere to cloth the way other dyes do, and that's why your jeans rub, fade, because the indigo rubs off of jeans. It doesn't stick like if you're using another color or another kind of dye. And one of the things that can happen when you're knitting with indigo is that the blue comes off on your hands while you're knitting. Not all of it, obviously, but the kind of excess is called crocking, and
mm,
it's considered to be a way that we customize our knitting. Is that the color won't be the same for any given hank of indigo because it's going to rub off on your hands however it rubs off for you as an individual knitter. And what I and that too to me was a way of like knitting yourself and your intention and your emotion um, into your work. There'll be no other blue that's quite like my blue.
you can't help but, right? You can't
Yeah,
help but become part of that process.
right. Right. You become part of the process. And whether that's
Hmm.
the physical process of working with your blue, although I also, again, beginner, didn't do a really good job of the blue needed a lot of rinsing, and that began to give me to worry me as somebody who lives in California using so much water.
The water.
And so I probably under rinsed it. And so my blue, I have to be careful because the blue will rub off on anything it comes near. But no, why did I start saying that? Because but so the blue, it's knitting the physical, the colors. Nobody else will make these colors, whether it's the blue or
Mm,
the other colors. So there's that aspect of it, but there's also that nobody else will have the experience that I'm emotionally knitting
mhm,
into it, which others may not perceive if I wear it or somebody else wears it or I give it away,
mm.
but I do. And my friend and you can also transform it, right? Because I had this feeling that my blanket that I knit during the pandemic was I like it pained me to look at it. It reminded
Yes.
me of things I didn't want to be reminded of. But then I gifted it to somebody, and now it's become this beautiful thing that she looks at and thinks, "Oh, my friend gave this to me, and I love it, and she loves me, and it gives me comfort and joy to look at this thing."
Oh my God, that transformation.
Yeah. And
That's
so much
beautiful.
also in this book was reckoning, with change and with transformation, whether it was that I look down at my hands that are knitting now and they're my mother's, or
Hmm.
that, transforming blue when you take it out, when you dye with indigo, you take the fabric out, the fiber out, and it's green, and then it turns blue before your
Mm.
eyes.
Oh,
So
that
there's
sounds
this,
so cool.
yeah, it's so cool. So it's this transformation, but there's all these ways that I was sort of resisting or embracing or capitulating to change, and learning this lesson that I think that we have our whole lives are always trying to learn, that change is the only constant, and I really think that so much of our task as
Hmm.
people to just like, if you don't accept that, it's just going to keep whacking you in the face over and over and over.
There's no way to kind of outrun that.
Nope.
Yeah, that's and it's an obvious point here, but this book could not have been written had there not been a lockdown,
Nope.
right?
Nope.
Right.
Nope. Nope.
Okay.
I mean, it's because I wouldn't have had time. I mean, maybe it could
Hmm.
have been, I suppose, but I wouldn't have done it, because one of the things for me, again, for better and worse, and I say this, as the word, I have had COVID, but obviously I'm fine, and lucky. Nobody that I love um, has been had long COVID or died from it, but that um, I am somebody who has been running in perpetual motion for years. That that when raising the child and having the marriage and having the job and traveling and working and reporting, I do not sit still very much. And the pandemic, the lockdown, I think for all of us, everything just came to this grinding halt, and you were forced to sit still, and that could hurt, but it also was an opportunity. And for me, it was this opportunity to both, do this thing from scratch and make this whole thing and go through this transformation, and also just through that reckon with all the transformation and change in our lives that we can ignore when we're running all the time.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The busyness and the distraction. Peggy, it has been such a delight to talk to you about this and what you really, the heart that you put into this book. I so appreciate. The book is Unraveling. We've been talking to Peggy Orenstein, and I love the book. I'm sure other people will love it as well. And I'm just so grateful that I got a chance to speak with you today.
Thank you. It was really fun. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. If you think decluttering could help you feel better and you could use a little assistance with that, check out the online course I've developed with professional organizer and designer Carrie Luderin. It's called Too Much Stuff. And Too Much Stuff is different from other courses or articles or guidance you may have used up. We give you clear steps to deal with the clutter and the tools to help you face the overwhelming feelings and the emotions that come up when we're going through our clutter. And a lot of those emotions are just feeling anxious or guilty or just basically flooded with a lot of different confusing feelings. The course is really practical. It's realistic. The lessons are short and punchy, and they're really manageable. We're not trying to set you up for some long exploratory, super in-depth, burdensome experience. We want something really helpful for you right now. We all need help with our anxiety. So being surrounded by more calm and less chaos can really help. So now's a good time to clear out the clutter so we can focus on what's really important in our lives. So find out more at zestfulaging.com. You'll see more about this under the web courses tab. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at zestfulaging@gmail.com. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.